Welcome to the Radiant Mission podcast. My name is Rebecca Toomey, and I'm here today with my amazing co-host, Rachel Smith.
Hey guys, is that a better hello? That sounds weird.
You just reminded me of this girl on Instagram who does satire videos of other moms, and that's how she says it. You know, she like makes fun of
influencers. Hey guys, what's up? It's Rachel here.
We'll work on this. We are on a mission
in the mirror.
Rachel needs to practice, but we are on a mission to encourage you on this journey through life and as you grow with your relationship with the Lord. Today, we are transitioning to a new topic, but we're also building on what we've been talking about with spiritual warfare. So in some ways, we aren't transitioning, but we are in other ways. We've got some other kind of mini series coming up in the coming weeks. So I'm excited to start this transition a little bit. We all know there's a spiritual war all around us. We talked a lot about that last episode. So it should really come of no surprise that one of the biggest transitions in our lives, becoming a mother or coming into motherhood, would be up for attack as well.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to start by saying that this was not something that I realized when I became a mother myself the first time. I didn't have this big aha moment where I found out I was pregnant and, oh my gosh, there's this spiritual war going on now, or even when she was born. My awakening of the spiritual aspect related to motherhood actually came as I healed from the trauma from my first birth. It was really in the pain and in the grief and in suffering that the Lord revealed this truth to me. Mm-hmm. So I want to pause here because, Rachel, I know, you and I have had different but similar experiences. And I want to ask about how this experience was for you. I think you had a few moments over the years that maybe were similar, but I think you and I have actually both been going through this awakening together over the past year about how much spiritual warfare there's in birth and the transition into becoming a mother. We've seen the devil sneaking his way in by sabotaging our birth experiences and then turn potentially, our relationship with our kids as a result of that. So
it really does.
What is your opinion or experience with this?
So I would say similarly to you that there's a lot that I have realized in hindsight that, wasn't clear to me in the moment. When I gave birth to my first son, who is 6.5 now, which is crazy.
That's crazy. He's gonna be 7.
Yeah. Can you believe I'm gonna have a 7-year-old? Like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And here he is, like, reading and writing and
diving to the bottom of the pool now.
Yes, he's a whole person. He's got an
he's
interest.
A whole person.
He
thinks he has a YouTube page, but that's
that's
a whole other thing.
Yeah. Oops. Anyways, when I had him, I've mentioned on the last episode and a few times before that I walked away from my relationship with the Lord for a very long time, like pretty much my whole adult life until after I had Everett. Mm-hmm. And so I had no relationship with God, or very like superficial, if that, at the time that I had him. So it was almost like I was in some battle without a weapon or like armor. Like I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Mm-hmm. And as I have mentioned before, and I will talk about more, and I am always a transparent talking about it, I have a history of mental illness, depression, and anxiety. It does not define me. It is not who I am, but it's something that I've gone through, and it is something that the enemy has used and continues to try to use against me. Mm-hmm. There's an element there of, genetics, and there's the element of chemical things that go on in my brain that might not, with like you or my sister, we are biologically related and have had different struggles, especially on this front. And um, one of a big thing and a lot of women experience is postpartum depression or anxiety.
Hmm.
And the catalyst for that is the hormones. The hormones are crazy after you have a baby. It's literally like they all come crashing
I have
down. Your
no idea what you're talking about.
yeah, right. Your body is like surging with so many hormones to keep a pregnancy going. And then it all comes crashing down.
Yeah.
But I will say, because I have had 2 children and it was very different the second time, and my births were very different. But after Everett, my first, it was awful. It was terrible. And I did not realize at the time that I most likely had postpartum anxiety.
Hmm.
But I will say that I now also look back on this in hindsight and see the spiritual element behind it. And I was like kind of aware at the time. So, particular example is I had a C-section with him, and the recovery from that was, not great. It was not all fun and roses.
Yeah, that's a pretty just a sidebar to be cautious about. Well, to caution folks that if you didn't have a terrible C-section, I think a lot of people will say things like, oh, well, C-section is easy. It's like the easy route. And they have really no idea that
No,
it's not
and
like
you know
that for
what?
most people.
Yes. And honestly, I had a quote unquote good C-section with Everett. Like there was no complications. Everything went fine, but it
And
still
yours
is
was scheduled too.
exactly.
So it's
And
not like it was a induction turn C-section. It was
right.
a scheduled, you went
Exactly.
in there knowing what was going to happen.
Exactly. And it still is not, I've had in my second C-section when I almost had a panic attack. I'm now on a full on this tangent. You got me off. The anesthesiologist, before he pushed some kind of sedative in my IV without my consent to calm me down, said to my husband that a C-section is the only major surgery that a person goes through where they are awake and conscious when everything is happening to them. And what's happening to your body is trauma. Like, even if it's the most clean cut, simple procedure, it is trauma on the body. Yes. And to be conscious for that it impacts your mind. Yeah. So anyway, end tangent.
Don't worry, we'll have more tangents to go on this. I'm hot about talking about
Don't
this
get
stuff,
us started on C-sections, even though I did it. All I have to do is say what my birth was. Anyways, but what I want to talk about, the example I want to give is the spiritual oppression that I experienced after my C-section. This was in the first few days home from the hospital. Breastfeeding was a literal nightmare. It was awful.
I remember every description about this.
Yeah.
And still do.
Yeah, it is. It was awful. It was very hard for me. And I'm not saying that I don't want to be mistaken that I think breastfeeding is awful. I don't. I had a very hard experience the first time. So it's just the place that I was at mentally. So we didn't have any physical help. We didn't have like family or anything. And the first few days home from the hospital, I was sleeping on the couch because I didn't feel like I could sit up in and out of bed. I needed because your lay on my
stomach was cut open.
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe we should put a trigger warning on this episode, huh? Trigger warning from here on out. Birth talk.
Put it in the text when you upload it. So I was sleeping on the couch and we had the pack and play bassinet next to me. And I not only wasn't sleeping because the baby was waking up to eat every 20 minutes because he could barely get anything out of me. But every time he even would fall asleep, I was crippled. It felt like literally an elephant sitting on my chest. That it was, again, like I talked about last episode, of those whispering voices overwhelming my brain
Mhm.
of intrusive thoughts. It was that times 1,000 of convincing me if I fell asleep, this baby was going to die. I was convinced without a shadow of a doubt that if I went to sleep, he would not survive. And now I can say that and realize how irrational that is.
So I want to ask you about the stem of that. We talked
Mhm.
about how social media feeds and fuels things. I want to talk about how the medical field, not to get on my tangents, can often fuel that whole idea that feeds the fear that our babies could die. And because I wholeheartedly believe that it starts at the OBGYN. Whenever you question something or whenever you ask a question about a medication or certain procedure, it's because, oh, your baby could die. And it seems like such a horrible thing for
Mhm.
anybody to say, but look at the seeds of doubt and fear that it
So
feeds
mhm.
into people or SIDS. I mean,
That
that
actually it
people feed that fear into you when you're pregnant that your baby could die from SIDS. Oh, your baby's going to die for no reason. It's just going to stop breathing. And this
mhm.
has become a whole industry now. They make a freaking sock that you put on babies so you can sit up and watch the app all night long to see how your oxygen level of the baby is.
Yeah.
And if you're going through this right now, I'm not trying to be insensitive to that fear. I want you to hear what Rachel is saying, that that is oppression. That is
Yeah.
the devil whispering to you that your baby could die. The Lord is protecting your child. The Lord is with you. He's protecting your children. He's not going to cause your baby to just die for no reason. There is a reason that babies die, and it's not because of nothing. It's because of something else.
Yeah.
Should we go there?
Yeah. 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 And that to me is, again, like that other experience I shared with my Jesus prayer, which this was many years before my realization about my Jesus prayer. But I remember laying on that couch and I was sobbing because I was so tired and I
I
couldn't
bet
fall
you
asleep.
weren't sleeping.
Yeah, and I remember
And
crying out.
you're surviving from literal fear.
Yes, exactly. And I remember crying out, Lord, please help me. Please take these thoughts away. Please rest my spirit and give me peace so I could sleep. And then it was almost like that weight came off of my chest and I felt calm and I fell asleep for the first time
Wow.
that night. And that this is why I wanted to share this story, is as we're coming at things, is everything that we're going to talk about is going to be rooted in the spiritual realm, so this
Mhm,
might not
mhm.
be the birth podcast for everyone,
Yeah,
because
sure,
if you don't
sure.
believe in these things, then you might not understand like what I'm saying in this experience that I
Mhm,
had.
mhm,
But speaking to believers who understand that we are in a spiritual battle and that there are demonic forces, like we
mhm.
talked about or mentioned,
Yeah,
you know, over 80 times in the
the
New
New
Testament
Testament.
alone,
Yeah.
that this is what it looks like in our lives. That's what it looked like. Like, yes, I did have hormonal stuff going on, and I did have, the physical trauma of coming off this birth and mental exhaustion. Those were very real physical things, but that's what the demons were preying on. They were
Mhm,
preying on that.
mhm,
And through the power of prayer, I was released in that moment from that. Now,
mhm.
that didn't end all of my anxiety over my child, especially Everett. I did have, a postpartum anxiety issue with him, that the Lord so graciously healed me from.
That's awesome.
With, I didn't even think to seek out a, medical professional with help for this. I didn't realize that's what was happening to me.
Mhm.
All I knew was to lean on the Lord. And he used, so to kind of, like this is kind of like an introductory of like bridging the gap between spiritual warfare and like the next few topics we're going to be talking about of motherhood and coming into motherhood is um the Lord used these experiences as I came into motherhood, and this me being thrust into this war that I didn't think I was ready for and I didn't even know I was necessarily in. And he used it to save me. He found me in these
Mm.
experiences because what I realized in the thrown back into the pit of anxiety that I was
Mhm.
thrown in, I cannot do this on my own. Like
Yeah.
I once almost died from my battle with anxiety and depression. And this time I was living for more than just myself. And this time I realized that I couldn't do it on my own. And
Mhm.
so as I continued to have these struggles in motherhood, I kept thinking back onto that night
Mm.
on the couch, my first
Mhm.
week of birth. And I kept thinking about how he brought that peace that surpassed understanding over me.
Mhm.
And he has continued to be faithful to do that
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
going on 7 years now.
7 years. That's
Yeah.
awesome. My experience obviously is totally different from yours in when it comes to like the moment that I realized, yours was in a dire moment and mine was too, but it just was a little bit different. If anybody's been following my Instagram, they probably know some of this story because I posted a lot of different videos about my juxtaposing births.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what really led me back to the Lord too, was
Yeah.
birth and coming into being a mother. Really, it was between between children that this happened. When I was pregnant with Brooke, it was when I had, also kind of a resurgence into my relationship with Christ. I actually had joined the worship team at the church that I was attending at the time. And, I had a pretty good pregnancy besides morning sickness that most of us have. And then we moved to Tennessee and I switched care providers, and she was a surgeon. So, there was that. And then I found
Yeah.
out at the end she wasn't going to be there probably when I went into labor. And then I did go into labor, and it just was this whole cascade of interventions. But it all stemmed from the fact that I didn't trust the Lord. I didn't trust him that I could get through that experience. As soon as I was in it, I was like, I can't do this. There's no way I could do this. This is way too hard. This is
Yeah.
way too painful, which is something that we're told by society from the time that we're little girls. We love to share our horror story births and with each other. And that's what everybody does. And then you grow up and you're like, oh yeah, this is terrible. Give me an epidural. Give me
Yeah.
something. Put me out. I don't want to do this.
Numb the
And
pain.
yeah, numb the pain. I don't want to feel these human feelings. And it was going through that experience. And then I ended up with an unnecessarian, I call it. And I'm going to share this kind of full story next week with my husband because you're out of town.
Yeah.
So that will be exciting. But I really want Mike to be there for this because this was not only a huge reveal for us about the Lord and his power and how good he is, but this was also a something that strengthened our marriage to go through this. I mean, at first it didn't strengthen our marriage because our daughter's birth, we totally fell off with each other. We didn't trust each other during that time. I was screaming and freaking out, and Mike was like, I can't deal with this. And we didn't meet together. We didn't come together. I didn't trust that he could make me feel better. I didn't trust that the Lord was going to get me through it. I just got the epidural. And then what ended up happening? I ended up with this C-section because the doctor got tired of waiting for the baby to come. It resulted in some injuries, bladder injury, hysterotomy extensions. I had to get a bunch of transfusions and stuff. And when I came out of that experience, I was so depressed for other reasons. I wasn't afraid. I didn't have the same fear that you did about something happening to Brooke. I was just like, this was horrible. This is
Yeah.
the worst thing that
It was
ever
like you
happened to
came back
me.
from a war.
That's what it felt like.
I remember talking to you those, like the day that you gave birth, and like, I mean, one, your voice was like gone because they had shoved a tube down your throat.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's so heartbreaking, like as like, a woman and your sister, but like and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, as we get into birth stories. I had birth trauma with my second,
Mhm.
and to then like see you fresh off the battlefield, knowing like the mental places you were going to go with this, of how birth trauma, it just takes you to pieces.
Mm.
It like, you're on high from becoming a mom and having a baby, and it's
Mm.
amazing and you're so happy, and then there's this, just
It's
like,
like you're robbed. It's like
right,
something is
exactly,
stolen from you, is what it feels
yes,
like.
and nobody else gets it, because
Mhm.
people will tell you at least you and the baby are okay.
Yeah, at least the
Like,
baby's okay. At least you're okay. And it's like, yeah, yeah, I'm alive.
yeah,
I'm living,
that's
but
like
I'm
the
not.
bare minimum here. Like,
But I'm not emotionally okay. In any
and
way, I'm not okay.
I think the point of like why you're so passionate about talking about this and sharing your birth is because the Lord wants so much more for us.
Yes.
He wants to
Yes.
give us life and give it abundantly. And he
Yes.
wants that for our birth
He
experiences
does.
as well.
100%. And that's why, yeah, for sure. I'd love to talk about this because I want to say it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have it, and it's not. Just so you know, I'm sharing the negative. I went on to have a completely natural home birth, unassisted, just me and my husband, and my mom was there and our doula, and that was it. And it was beautiful. And God was present and he protected us. And it was the most beautiful experience I could ever have. And going through that for me is what it totally changed me. And I
Yeah.
was able to see God and birth and this transition into motherhood in such a new way. And to see that this is a stronghold for the devil, birth. He
Yeah.
wants to sabotage it. He wants to steal it. He wants to take it away from us. He wants us to be destroyed and to be so focused on our emotions and on what we're going through and the pain and the suffering and the fear and the stress and the anxiety that we don't connect with our babies and that we don't enjoy it and that we're just in this turmoil of a month or two that we're not working before we have to go back to work and then give our baby away to
Mm-hmm.
strangers and then go through if for those that are going back to work and decide that they want to use breast milk, they have to figure out how to pump in a closet somewhere where people are opening the door. And there's so much that goes into this that we are being robbed of. And
Mm-hmm.
that is what I want to bring awareness to. And I think you are on the same page that we want to
Absolutely.
we want to shine a big, big spotlight on
Yeah.
this because it's important. This is something that doesn't have to be the way that the world is telling you that it is. We have been conditioned to think that birth needs to look a certain way or take place a certain way, when really the truth is we need to bury ourselves in prayer and pray
Mm-hmm.
for the Lord to lead us where he intends for us to go. Because I don't want to get
Absolutely.
on my high horse over here and say that every person needs to stay home and have a baby in a ditch, which I would before I would go to a hospital, but that's my own personal opinion. There are a small percentage of people, approximately 3 to 5% of all births, that may need medical help from a physician. And so I'm not going to tell you or give any sort of medical advice to say that this is the way,
Mhm.
but I want you, if you're listening or you have a sister in Christ or a daughter or a friend, seek Yah's way.
Yeah.
His way is
Yeah.
the
Yahweh
way.
is the way.
Yahweh is the way.
That's
It's
got to be
his
a
way.
t-shirt.
Yeah, I'll work on that one.
Actually, interestingly, I have a t-shirt. This is just fresh in my mind because I was wearing the shirt like yesterday, and it says Yeshua, the way, the truth, the life, on 832 or whatever it is. I can't remember where it is. And the other day I was brushing my teeth in the mirror, and the way reflected in the mirror says Yahweh.
Oh, that's funny.
I was like, wow, this is something.
That is very funny. It's
Yeah.
true though. I mean, when it comes down to it, I think the best thing for anyone that is pregnant or is even, if you're trying to conceive, whatever it may be, pray for the Lord's way, for God to make his way and to
Mhm.
make your path clear,
Yeah.
because he will show you and he will lead you down that road. And we're going to talk too in shortly after we kind of get into motherhood topics and birth a little bit about even infertility and how to trust the Lord in the waiting, which is not easy. Just like it's not easy to trust the Lord when you're going into birth, especially for the first time and you're scared, you're afraid, you don't know what to expect. Trusting him through that, it will change you if you let it.
Yeah.
If you allow him to lead you. And I wanted to get us started together because, like I said, you're going out of town,
Yeah.
but you helped me tremendously. Actually, right when I was in my first stage of labor, when my water was breaking, I was on the phone with you, sitting on the toilet, crying because I was experiencing spiritual warfare the
Yeah.
day of my birth. The moment I was going into that transition, the devil came in and he was trying to swoop in and steal the whole thing, steal the show, ruin it. And you saw it for what it was.
Yeah.
Even I was like, ah. And you're like, hey, sis, this is an attack. Like, you are
Yeah.
literally being attacked right now. Everything has been working against you trying to follow what the Lord is calling you to do, which is to just stay home and have a baby how
Yeah.
you're supposed to have a baby, just naturally. And you really stepped up and pointed out some things that I hadn't thought about. So I wanted to kind of take a moment to let you share about that a little bit.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about that is, I mean, like all the things leading up to your birth and all the stuff thrown at you, so much junk. And I was afraid. Like I saw, I supported you,
Yeah.
but I had my own fears,
Yeah.
but I saw your like unwavering faith. Like, yeah, you had your moments of like upset because there were so many upsetting things that happened to you.
Mhm.
Um, like we had cried together about some of the crap that you had to go through the last weeks of your pregnancy with Ben. But I have, you know, the faith that the Lord instilled in you, and that the trust you had in the promises that he gave you. I could see those. And I know, because I've experienced it too, is when the Lord puts something on your heart and you have a conviction, nobody else is going to understand that. And so I knew that with you. It's like, I'm not going to understand, but I'm going to have faith with you. Like you have your faith and I will kind of like, I picture that, um, the story of Moses when they were battling, I think it was like the Amorites or something. And Moses had to have his arms up. Every time he had his arms up, the Israelites would prevail. But every time he put his arms down, they started to be defeated. So
Mm.
he stood there for hours and hours with his arms up. And then I'm pretty sure it was Aaron and I forget who the other person was, but two of the men came and they put a rock under him for his sit on, and they held his arms up for him. And I just think that that is such a beautiful picture of faith is nobody had the role of Moses except for him.
Mm.
And for whatever reason, God gave him that you're going to be the one to hold your arms up, and it's going to, prevail in the spiritual realm that will overflow into the physical. But these other men came alongside him and helped him to carry that weight. So that's to me, like, the message of faith behind that is that's what I felt about your birth, is you were the one bearing the weight and the physical pain of everything going on in both the spiritual and the physical, literally happening, your water breaking as we're on the phone. And while I didn't have that same, I wasn't the one called for it in that moment, I could be there helping hold your arm up for at least while the battle prevailed.
And you did. I thank you. Thank you for doing that, because I couldn't, I wouldn't have known what to do if it wasn't for you. Like, God definitely put you there in that moment and gave you the words to speak that were exactly what needed to be said in that moment. And I guess we'll just make this a little teaser then, because I'm not going to talk about until
we are being a little bit vague.
We're being vague, but I think we'll leave it as a teaser so folks can tune in to the next one to hear what happened and why.
Exactly why that was very intense spiritual warfare of that didn't even really have to do with your birth. It was relationships under attack. Mm-hmm. But that, I will say, just going into it, I could see the enemy all over it. It was, again, like even though we were thousands of miles apart on the phone, I could see with my spiritual eyes his hands all over it, and that you were gonna have the baby that day. So we needed to fight this battle right now so that you could get to your birth and then deal with this problem at a future time. Because the thing that is most important is to bring this new soul into the world.
Yeah. And that's something worth pointing out is, since then, I have recognized and seen this same thing that happened to me happen to 1,000 women. I'm in a bunch of unassisted home birth groups, and I didn't understand what it was, but I saw it kind of happening where things would pop up, day of the birth, close to the birth, and that is when I realized how much spiritual warfare there is around this, because why wouldn't the devil want to sabotage the most important time in a human's life? And that is them coming into the world. If he could just start that thing off with darkness, I got him from day one, from moment one. So it is definitely something we'll be continuing to explore, and let's leave it on a cliffhanger.
Be continued.
To be continued. There's so much to be spoken about with this, but I think this is a great start. I hope you guys are in for this, because this is going to be some interesting stuff. I also do want to throw out there, I was recently on the Healing Birth podcast and shared my birth story there in about an hour and 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear more about that, definitely head over to Healing Birth. I'll link it in the show notes as well. Diana's awesome over there. And we'll be talking about this more, like I said, but thank you for being on this journey with us. We hope that this discussion got you thinking.
Yeah.
And really maybe putting some things into perspective with your own birth or upcoming, or again, if you know somebody, send them this way, because we want to help everyone and every single person to have a beautiful birth, because you can have a beautiful birth and it can be full of the Lord and positive and amazing and one of the best moments of your life.
And I do just want to say with that, because I feel like, if there's any listeners who aren't yet married or mothers or expecting, that they may think like that these conversations aren't for them.
Okay.
And I just want to encourage any listeners to keep listening to these stories, because especially as you go through your two birth stories, I wish I had heard
Mm.
stories like that before I became a mom. And like you mentioned a few times, society has programmed us to think that birth is a certain way, whether we know it or not. It's all over TV, movies.
Mhm.
It's this programming that has been put into our minds before we ever become mothers. And so I think it is important, even if you're single or without children, um, to, still listen, because there's still a lot that you can get from it that actually even help for the future of doing your own research and
Yeah,
understanding, what goes on with these things better.
that's a great point. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's a really great point, because there are a lot of things that we are led down certain roads, and we don't have to be. We can take a different path. We don't have to listen to the stories. We can actually rewrite our own
Yeah.
computer files, and that's something that I'm going to talk about, is how I deleted my own mental trash, my mental files about what birth was, and started completely over. Even though I myself had a terrible experience the first time,
Yeah.
I had to um, grieve it and pray over it and forgive too. And that, in that there was forgiveness that needed to be granted in that too, to the surgeon who I was holding a lot of resentment towards.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I agree with Rachel. I hope that you keep listening and that this helps you as you're moving forward too.
Yeah.
If you want to follow along outside the podcast, of course, as always, you can check out Instagram at The Radiant Mission. Shoot us an email at theradiantmission@gmail.com. And if you want to watch in video format, check it out on YouTube. Rebecca TWOMEY. There's my jingle. Or if you search The Radiant Mission, you can probably find it.
Yeah.
I will close us with Psalm 139, 13 and 14. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well.
Oh, I love that one.
Yes, I love it too. Wishing you guys a radiant week, and we will see you next week.
Bye, guys.